Hi, welcome back to Pope's Plates. Today we're going to make something a little bit different. It is chicken and dumpling soup. This recipe is kind of a twist on a recipe that one of my really good friends made me when I had a series of back surgeries about 20 years ago. And I love that dish, but it's really cold and rainy here. And so I've kind of adapted it to be a soup, chicken and dumplings and a soup. The first thing we're going to do before we start prepping the soup is I'm going to salt and pepper two, I would say these are medium-sized chicken breasts, and I'm going to add a little bit of garlic powder. Now, I like to bake my chicken when I put it in chicken and dumpling soup. Other people put it in there and let the broth cook it. That's not my favorite way to do it, but you can do that if you want to. So I'm going to put these chicken breasts into a 350 degree oven until they reach temp. The next thing I'm going to do while the chicken is cooking and before I prep the soup is make the dumplings. Now these are, I honestly just made it up and it's worked for me. I'm going to take about a cup of flour, and I'm just gonna sort of measure that as best as I can. About a half teaspoon of salt, a half teaspoon of pepper, about a half teaspoon of garlic powder, and depending on how fluffy you want your dumplings, I like mine pretty fluffy, goodness. I'm going to add about 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder. I have mistakenly used baking soda before, and it was very bitter and it did not fluff up. So make sure that you use baking powder. And I'm going to mix this up, and then I'm going to start adding, I'm going to pull this over here, just a little bit of water. And I do this, it depends on the humidity and everything on how much water I added about 1/4 of a cup. You can also use milk if you want to. I added about 1/4 of a cup. That was not enough. So I'm going to add about another 1/2 a cup. And you're just going to mix this until it comes into kind of a doughy consistency. And I'll show you what the consistency is. Now, these do not have a whole lot of flavor themselves. I take that back. They're pretty flavorful because of garlic powder and salt and pepper. If you want to put in Italian seasoning, whatever, you can flavor these however you want to. But it is the consistency of biscuit dough. And I'm going to set this over to the side. And I'm setting it over to the side and letting it kind of puff up and mix together so that our dumplings are light and fluffy when we put them in the water. Now we're going to start prepping our soup. I want to tell you one thing before we prep. It is that when I cut the ends off of this onion, or we've cut the ends off of some celery, I put that in a freezer bag, and you're going to see why soon. Because we make our homemade chicken broth. It's a lot cheaper. You know exactly what's going in it. And so I will cut the ends off of everything: garlic, onion, celery, carrots, not usually green peppers, and freeze them. And then when I'm ready to make chicken broth, I just add them to the broth because you're going to strain all the paper and stuff out. So I'm going to start by cutting a pretty large onion. And again, I'm going to set this aside to freeze. And we don't have to cut these too terribly small because they're going to cook down in our soup. But we don't want huge sliced chunks of onion either. This soup really goes a long way, and actually this is a good base for chicken noodle soup, really any kind of vegetable soup or chicken based soup. I think it's a really good base for. In fact, this is exactly what I do to start off making chicken noodle soup and chicken and rice soup. So if you're wanting to make any of those, this is a great base. And as you can see, the onions are not cut up too small. Well, you can't see. I have the bowl in the way. Move the bowl. And then I'm going to cut probably 4 stalks of celery. I'm going to cut them in half first. That's just a preference because I don't love just gigantic pieces of celery. They get kind of stringy, I guess. And then we're going to slice these. I like onions and carrots more than celery. You can obviously put in as much or as little of any of these vegetables as you want. I'm just going to add this celery to the same bowl because it's all going to go in at the same time. Now, normally I would cut up actual large size carrots, but I had some of these small, what do you call them? Cocktail carrots, but they're baby carrots, and that I need to use. So I'm going to cut these in maybe 3 pieces, because if I was using regular, that means our chicken is ready. So if I was using regular, Alexa, stop. If I was using regular carrots, I would cut them into big chunks. I like my soup kind of sweet, and so I'm going to put more carrots than you might want. And I dropped one into Charlie's water bowl. He's very excited. Okay, we have got our carrots cut, and we're going to head over to the stove and complete the soup. So I have a soup pot, small soup pot, over medium heat, and I'm going to put in probably 1.5 teaspoons of olive oil. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to brown or begin to caramelize the vegetables. And then I'm going to add some herbs and not spices, just herbs and some broth. So we've got our carrots, onions, and celery. And they're going to go in nice and sizzly. And I'm just going to let these brown for just a little bit because we're going to simmer our soup for, I don't know, 15-20 minutes, and they will soften in the soup when it's simmering. All right, while those are browning, I'm going to add a pinch of salt, a pinch of pepper, actually more than a pinch, like 2 pinches, and about 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Obviously, if you have fresh herbs, use fresh herbs, but they're really expensive and not in season right now, and so I'm going to use the dried herbs. Now, what I was telling you about earlier is with all of the vegetable ends that I have, I'll save them for a couple of months, and then I will buy usually 2 whole chickens, and I will bake the chickens, remove the meat, and then I will toast, I don't know if toast is brown, the bones in the oven just until probably 20 minutes on 400, just the bones. Maybe not 20 minutes. You may want to check it. And then I add all of my vegetable ends, 4 quarts of water, maybe more water. You'll just see how much you can to cover all the chicken. Any extra herbs I have in the house, some salt, pepper, I think I mentioned the chicken bones, and you're going to bring it to a boil and then cut it down to low, actually simmer. I simmer mine for about 5 hours on very low. And then I strain it through a really fine colander. If you don't want any fat at all, you can add cheesecloth to that. And that is the chicken broth that we're going to use for our soup. Still a little bit frozen in the middle. So we're going to let this soup simmer for, I'm going to say 20-25 minutes. And I'm going to take our chicken out of the oven. And let it cool. It's just easier for me to cut when it's cool. Oh yeah, that looks good. Get some good color on it. So these are going to cool, and we'll get back to you when I'm ready to finish putting the soup together. Our soup is still simmering, and the chicken has come out of the oven, and it has cooled. It's a lot easier for me to cut it when it's cooler. And I'm just going to use a knife and fork. You could shred this. I just like bigger chunks of chicken. And cut this into bite-sized pieces. Okay, my mom has joined me because I want to get a good picture of what is happening next. Okay, so what I've done is I've taken the dough. I've put it, if you have a pastry bag, that would be great. I've put it in a Ziploc bag. I have squeezed it. I'm going to cut a small hole in it. We're going to use this like it's a piping bag. Now, your water needs to be at a rolling boil. We're going to pipe a little, cut. Pipe a little, cut. It needs to be at a rolling boil because there needs to be space for them to puff up. And the scissors help your fingers not get so messy. And you can see already they're starting to puff up a little bit. They're so light. I love the way this looks. I'm going to save the rest of this dough because when you eat it a second day, when you reheat it over and over again, the dumplings can get a little dense. And so I keep some, and when I reheat my soup, I add new dumplings in. So as you can see, it looks so good. They're nice and light. They've doubled maybe in size. They floated to the top. I think I'm going to kind of gently put the chicken in. Like this. And we're going to stir it pretty gently because our dumplings they're not fragile, but they can come apart easily. So as you can see, let me back up a little bit. As you can see, we kind of have the best of both worlds. We have chicken and dumplings, and we have chicken soup. This is one of my favorite things to eat, especially when it's cold and when I am sick. Our soup is ready. I'm going to ladle it into a bowl. Oh my gosh, it smells so good, and it looks so good. And one of my favorite things about this particular brand or kind of soup is that I know everything that went in this because I made the broth. I didn't raise the chickens, but I did so much of it on my own, so I know exactly what's in here. It's a cold day today, so we're going to be having some soup for dinner. I hope you loved this recipe as much as we did. If you make this recipe, please let us know. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel. Until we see you next time, let's keep cooking.